Before I died of cancer in 2001, I recorded this confession. For 60 years, I kept a secret that could destroy everything you believe about reality. In 1945, the Nazis didn't just lose the war. They opened a door to another dimension, and 63 people walked through it. This is classified footage the CIA tried to bury. Watch until the end, because what happened in 1961 proves they're still out there. Welcome to Battleground Times. This is where war turns into dark. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe and like the video. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Thank you for your support. Now, let's begin. My name is Daniel Hartman. Before I tell you what happened, you need to understand something. I interviewed defectors who described horrors beyond imagination. I helped governments conceal secrets they decided the world wasn't ready for. But that winter in 1963 changed everything I thought I knew about reality. It started with a phone call on December 3rd. I was sitting in my office at Langley, Virginia, reviewing intelligence reports from East Berlin. My secure line rang. The voice belonged to Deputy Director Morrison, a man I'd spoken to exactly twice in 12 years. "Hartman," he said. His voice was clipped and cold. "Conference room 7, 10 minutes. Tell no one." Conference room 7 was in the basement, in a section most employees didn't even know existed. When I arrived, Morrison was waiting. 2 men in civilian clothes stood beside him. They radiated the kind of authority that comes from agencies even more secretive than ours. "Sit down, Hartman," Morrison said. He slid a manila folder across the table. "What I'm about to tell you is classified beyond anything you've encountered. This conversation never happened. This meeting never took place." He paused, his eyes locked on mine. "If you accept this assignment, you will never speak of it to anyone. Not your wife, not your children, not your priest. Are we clear?" I nodded. After 12 years, I knew better than to ask unnecessary questions. "Good. Open the folder." Inside was a single photograph, black and white, grainy, clearly taken in poor lighting. It showed what appeared to be a large bell-shaped object, maybe 3 meters tall, suspended by heavy chains in some kind of underground facility. The object had a smooth metallic surface. Cables or conduits ran along its exterior. Around its base, I could make out strange symbols. They weren't quite German, they weren't quite anything I recognized. "This photograph was taken in January 1945, Morrison said, in a facility located somewhere in the Owl Mountains, near the border between Germany and Poland. The object you're looking at was called Die Glock." "The bell," he leaned forward. "It was the crown jewel of a research program so secret that even most of Hitler's inner circle didn't know it existed." "What kind of research?" I asked. Morrison exchanged glances with the 2 unnamed men. "That's what we need you to find out. For 18 years, we've known almost nothing about this program. The Nazis destroyed every document, killed every witness, demolished every facility connected to it." He paused again. "When our forces captured German scientists after the war, none of them would talk about Die Glock. Not under interrogation, not under sodium pentothal, not even when we offered them immunity and comfortable lives in America. Whatever they knew," Morrison continued, "they were more afraid of, revealing it than they were of us." "So what changed?" I asked. Morrison slid another item across the table, a leather-bound journal. Its pages were yellowed with age. Its cover was stained with what might have been water damage, or might have been something else. 3 weeks ago, a construction crew in Poland was excavating near the Owl Mountains. They broke through into an underground chamber that had been sealed since the war. Inside, they found this, and several crates of documents that had somehow escaped destruction. The Polish government contacted us immediately. They want nothing to do with whatever was in that facility. I picked up the journal carefully. The handwriting inside was small, precise, feminine. The text was in German, which I read fluently. "The journal belonged to a woman named Amelia Weiss," Morrison said. "According to our preliminary research, she was a research assistant assigned to the Die Glock project in 1944. He paused. "She's the only person we've ever identified who might have survived whatever happened in that facility. Her journal describes events that, well, you'll need to read it yourself." "Where is she now?" I asked. "Unknown. After the war, Amelia Weiss disappeared completely. No immigration records, no death certificate, nothing. She either died in the chaos of 1945 or she's been hiding for 18 years. Morrison stood up. The meeting was clearly coming to an end. Your assignment is to find out what really happened in that facility. Locate any surviving witnesses. Determine whether Die Glock poses any ongoing threat to national security. I almost laughed at that last part. A Nazi experiment from 1945 posing an ongoing threat. But something in Morrison's expression stopped me. He wasn't joking. He was afraid. One more thing, he said as I stood to leave. The documents recovered from that chamber include references to American involvement in the project after the war. Operation Paperclip personnel, KIA funding, continued research at facilities on American soil. His voice dropped lower. If that information becomes public, it could destroy this agency and everyone associated with it. Find out the truth, Hartman, but be prepared for the possibility that the truth is worse than anything you've imagined. I wanted to understand why this particular project warranted such extreme secrecy, but Morrison's expression made it clear the briefing was over. As I left the conference room, one of the unnamed men stopped me. His hand gripped my shoulder. He leaned close. His breath smelled of coffee and cigarettes. "Hartman," he said quietly, "I've read that journal, all of it. Whatever you think you know about physics, about time, about the nature of reality, forget it." He released my shoulder. "None of it applies to what you're about to encounter. And if you start to feel like you're losing your grip on what's real and what isn't, trust that feeling, because in this case, reality itself might be the lie." Then he walked away, leaving me standing in the corridor, with a growing sense that I had just accepted an assignment that would change everything I thought I knew about the world. I spent the flight to Poland reading Amelia Weiss's journal from cover to cover. What I found in those pages kept me awake for the next 3 nights, and I've never slept well since. The journal began in September 1944, when a young physicist named Amelia Weiss was assigned to a facility she called Der Riese, the Giant. She was 28 years old. She had studied under some of Germany's greatest scientists before the war. Her first entry was dated September 15, 1944. I arrived at the facility today after a journey I am forbidden to describe. The complex is built into the mountains themselves, a labyrinth of tunnels and chambers that seems to extend endlessly into the earth. She wrote about being assigned to work under Dr. Victor Brandt, whose reputation preceded him. Before the war, he was considered one of the finest theoretical physicists in Europe. Now, he leads a team of 60 scientists working on something called Project Kronos, she wrote. When I asked what Kronos meant, Dr. Brandt smiled in a way that made me uncomfortable. "Time," he said. "We are learning to control time itself." She assumed he was speaking metaphorically. She was wrong. The entries that followed described her growing involvement in the project, and her dawning horror at what she was helping to create. Die Glock, she learned, was not simply a weapon or a power source. It was something far more dangerous. October 3rd, 1944, the day she finally saw Die Glock for the first time. "It sits in the deepest chamber of the facility," she wrote, suspended from the ceiling by chains thick enough to anchor a battleship. The bell is approximately 3 meters tall, made from a metal alloy that Dr. Brandt claims does not exist in nature. Its surface was covered in symbols that he said predated human civilization, copied from artifacts recovered from archaeological sites across Europe and the Middle East. When she asked where the symbols came from, he told her something that chilled her to the bone. They were found in places that officially do not exist, places where reality operates according to different rules. The bell was powered by a substance called Serum 5025, a violet-colored liquid that glowed with its own inner light. No one would tell her what Serum 5025 was made from, but she heard rumors about heavy metals, about radioactive isotopes, about organic compounds extracted from sources she didn't want to think about. When Die Glock is activated, she wrote, it produces a field that Dr. Brandt calls the vortex. Within this field, time does not flow as it should. Objects age decades in seconds. Living tissue experiences temporal displacement. And sometimes, according to whispered stories she overheard, things appeared in the vortex that were not there before. Things from other times, other places, other realities entirely. I am beginning to understand, she wrote, why so many scientists who worked here before me are no longer alive. As I read further on that flight to Poland, the journal entries became increasingly disturbing. Amelia described experiments that killed dozens of test subjects, prisoners from concentration camps who were exposed to Die Glocke's field, who experienced what she called temporal dissolution. Their bodies aged and de-aged simultaneously, their cells torn apart by forces that human biology was never meant to experience. But the deaths weren't the worst part. November 12, 1944. Something changed in the facility. The mood shifted from excitement to fear. Last week's experiment produced results that no one can explain, she wrote. We activated Die Glock at higher power levels than ever before. The vortex expanded beyond its normal boundaries, filling the entire test chamber with violet light. And then something happened that she still could not fully process. Time stopped, not metaphorically, not subjectively. Time actually stopped. With time, for approximately 37 seconds, nothing in the facility moved. Hearts did not beat. Lungs did not breathe. Electrical systems froze mid-cycle. The only thing that continued to function was Die Glock itself, humming at a frequency that seemed to exist outside normal space-time. But here is what terrified her. During those 37 seconds, several members of the observation team reported seeing things. Figures moving through the frozen moment. Shapes that were not human. That seemed to be examining them like specimens in a laboratory. One technician claimed he saw a face pressed against the observation window. A face with too many eyes, watching with what he described as ancient curiosity. Dr. Brandt is ecstatic, she wrote. He believes we are on the verge of a breakthrough that will change the course of human history. But I've seen the look in the eyes of the soldiers who guard this facility. They're not excited, they're terrified. Her final words in that entry haunted me. We have opened a door, and I'm no longer certain we can close it. The journal continued with increasingly disturbing observations over the following weeks. November 28, 1944. 5 more test subjects died that day. Prisoners from the camps brought there like cattle to slaughter. An S officer named Richter watched the experiments with cold satisfaction, taking notes in a leather-bound book he never let anyone else see. He doesn't care about the science, Amelia wrote, only about results that can be reported to Berlin. Every death is just a data point to him. But something strange happened during that day's experiment. One of the subjects didn't die immediately when exposed to the field. A Polish man, perhaps 40 years old. Instead, he began speaking in a language none of them recognized. Not Polish, not German, not any language in their records. The words seemed to bypass normal hearing, she wrote, resonating directly in our minds. Dr. Brandt was fascinated. He ordered the experiment continued despite the obvious danger. The subject spoke for nearly 3 minutes before his body finally gave out. But in those 3 minutes, he said things that Dr. Brandt transcribed with trembling hands. He spoke of beings that exist in the spaces between seconds, of intelligences that perceive our entire universe as we might perceive a single page in an infinite book, of a hunger that has waited since before the stars were born. When Amelia asked Victor what it meant, he looked at her with eyes that held something she had never seen before. Not madness exactly, something worse, certainty. It means we're on the right track, he said. It means they know we're coming, December 15th, 1944. The war was going badly for Germany. Everyone knew it, though no one dared say it aloud. The Allied forces advanced from the west, the Soviets from the east. Berlin spoke of miracle weapons that would turn the tide, but those who worked in that facility knew the truth. There was only one miracle weapon, and it was not meant to win wars. Victor had become obsessed with completing the project before the facility fell to the enemy. He worked 20 hours a day, barely eating, barely sleeping. When Amelia tried to speak to him about anything other than Die Glock, he looked through her as if she wasn't there. I've begun to notice changes in him, she wrote. Physical changes. His hair, which was dark brown when I met him, is now streaked with gray. His eyes had developed a faint luminescence that was visible in the dark. When she asked if he was feeling well, he laughed. I've never felt better, he said. The field is changing me, Amelia. Preparing me for what comes next. Soon I won't need this body at all. Soon I'll be free of every limitation that makes us human. Her final words in that entry were simple, but they carried the weight of everything she had witnessed. I should be frightened. I am frightened. But I'm also beginning to understand that what happens here is beyond my control, beyond anyone's control. Events have been set in motion that will proceed to their conclusion regardless of what any of us wants. God help us all. I closed the journal as the plane began its descent into Poland. My hands were shaking. I had read intelligence reports about Nazi atrocities, about weapons programs and human experiments. But this was different. This was something that challenged the very foundations of what I thought was possible. And according to Morrison, this wasn't just history. The research had continued after the war. In American facilities, Soviet facilities, hidden from the public, hidden from most of the government itself. I was being sent to find out the truth. But as that unnamed agent had warned me, I was beginning to suspect that the truth was worse than anything I had imagined. The door had been opened in 1945, and according to everything I had just read, it had never been fully closed. Something was still out there, waiting, watching, hungry, and I was about to walk directly into its shadow. I arrived in Poland on December 8, 1963, traveling under a false identity with credentials that identified me as an academic researcher studying wartime industrial facilities. My contact was a local intelligence asset named Kowalski, who had been cultivating sources in the region for years. The construction site is about 30 kilometers from here, Kowalski told me, as we drove through snow-covered countryside that looked like it hadn't changed since the war. The workers who found the chamber have been persuaded to forget what they saw, but the chamber itself is still accessible. The Polish government has sealed it, but I can get you inside. What about witnesses? I asked. Anyone who might have worked at the facility during the war. Kowalski was silent for a moment. There is one, he said finally. An old woman who lives in a village near the mountains. The locals say she appeared after the war, speaking German, refusing to talk about her past. She's lived there for 18 years. Alone, he paused. Never leaving. Never aging. Never aging? I know how it sounds, Kowalski said, but the villagers swear it's true. They say she looked 60 years old when she arrived in 1945. She still looks 60 years old today. What's her name? She calls herself Maria Novak, but when she first arrived, before she learned to hide her identity, some of the villagers heard her muttering in her sleep, calling out for someone named Victor, crying about something called Die Glock. I needed to understand what had happened there in the final days of the war. The entrance to the underground complex was hidden in a ravine, concealed behind what had once been a concrete bunker, but was now little more than a pile of rubble. Kowalski led me through a narrow passage that had been recently excavated. Our flashlights cut through darkness that felt somehow thicker than normal darkness, more resistant to light. The main chamber is about 200 meters ahead, Kowalski said, his voice echoing strangely in the confined space. That's where they found the journal and the documents. But I should warn you, there's something wrong with this place. Wrong how? The workers who excavated it reported feeling sick, disoriented. Some of them had nightmares for weeks afterward. One of them swears he saw his dead mother walking through the tunnels. Did you see anything? Kowalski didn't answer, but I noticed his hand was shaking as he held his flashlight. The main chamber was exactly as Amelia had described it in her journal. A vast underground space carved from solid rock, with a ceiling that disappeared into shadows above our heads. The chains that had once held Die Glock were still there, hanging from massive hooks embedded in the stone. The bell itself was gone. The Soviets took it, Kowalski said, following my gaze. In 1945, they stripped this facility of everything valuable. Die Glock, the documents, the surviving scientists, all of it went east. The Americans got some of it through defectors and intelligence operations over the years, but the bell itself, no one knows where it ended up. Chamber. Examining the walls with my flashlight, they were covered in symbols. The same symbols I had seen in the photograph. The same symbols Amelia had described in her journal. But there was something else too. As if something had exploded here with tremendous force, and on the floor, barely visible under decades of dust and debris, I saw stains. Dark stains that might have been oil or rust, or something else entirely. Stains that formed patterns too regular to be accidental, brushing away the dust with my gloved hand. The patterns became clearer. Concentric circles radiating outward from the center of the chamber where Die Glock had once hung, and within those circles, shapes that might have been symbols, or might have been something else. Impressions left in the stone itself, as if the floor had been momentarily softened by intense heat or some other force, and then hardened again, preserving whatever had pressed against it. What do you make of this? I asked Kowalski, pointing to one of the shapes. He knelt beside me, studying the impression with his flashlight. His face went pale. It looks like a handprint, he said slowly. But the proportions are wrong, the fingers are too long, and there are too many of them. He was right. For each one nearly twice the length of a human finger, splayed out as if reaching for something, or pressing down to push itself upward. There are more over here, I said, moving my light across the floor, dozens of them, all oriented toward the center of the chamber. We spent the next hour documenting what we found. Handprints, if they could be called that, covering almost every square meter of the floor. Some were pressed into the stone. Others seemed to have been burned into the surface, leaving behind a residue that my equipment couldn't identify. And among the handprints, scattered like leaves after a storm, we found other artifacts. A woman's shoe, perfectly preserved. A pair of spectacles with one lens cracked. A pocket watch that had stopped at exactly 11:47 p.m. But the most disturbing discovery was in a small alcove at the edge of the chamber. Hidden behind a collapsed section of wall, we found what appeared to be a shrine. Candles, long since burned down to stubs. Photographs of people I didn't recognize, arranged in a circle, and in the center, carved into the stone with what must have been painstaking effort, a single word in German: "Vergib." Someone had survived that final night. Someone had returned to this chamber after the horror had ended, and created this memorial for those who had been taken, and then they had disappeared into the chaos of a collapsing Reich, carrying their secrets with them. I thought of Amelia Weiss, the woman Kowalski had told me about, the woman who had lived in the nearby village for 18 years, never aging, never speaking about her past. "Kowalski," I said, my voice barely above a whisper in the oppressive silence of the chamber. "What do you know about what happened here at the end of the war?" "Only rumors," he said. "Stories passed down by people who lived in the area. They say that in the last week of January 1945, something went wrong in this facility." He paused. There were lights in the sky above the mountains, strange colors that no one had ever seen before, sounds that weren't quite sounds, more like vibrations that you felt in your bones rather than heard with your ears. And then on the night of January 28th, there was an event that no one can properly describe. "What kind of event?" Kowalski's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "The villagers say that time itself went wrong. For several hours, the sun rose and set multiple times. People experienced moments from their past and future simultaneously. Some people disappeared entirely and were never seen again. Others appeared out of nowhere, strangers who claimed to be from different years, different places, different versions of reality." He looked around the chamber nervously, and the facility sealed. The Nazis who survived whatever happened here sealed every entrance, killed anyone who knew too much, and fled. By the time the Soviets arrived a few months later, there was nothing left but empty tunnels and these symbols on the walls. First, feeling something shift in my understanding of the world. I had spent my career dealing with secrets, political secrets, military secrets, the kinds of secrets that governments killed to protect, but this was different. This was a secret that challenged the very foundations of reality itself, and according to Amelia's journal, the experiment that had created this disaster wasn't an accident. It was exactly what Dr. Victor Brandt had intended. "I need to meet Maria Novak," I said, "tonight, before anyone else learns I'm here." The village where Maria Novak lived was a collection of wooden houses, clustered around a small church, the kind of place that seemed to exist outside of time. As Kowalski and I approached the house at the edge of the settlement, I noticed that the other villagers were watching us from their windows, their faces pale and anxious. Kowalski murmured. "Not because she's done anything to them, but because of what she represents. They've lived with the memory of that night in 1945 for almost 20 years. She's a living reminder that what happened was real." The house itself was small, neat, surrounded by a garden that was somehow still green despite the winter cold. When I knocked on the door, it opened almost immediately, as if she had been expecting us. Amelia Weiss stood in the doorway, matching the photograph in the file Morrison had given me. Kowalski had been right. She looked 60 years old, but there was something about her that suggested she had been 60 for a very long time, and might remain 60 for a very long time to come. "You're American," she said in accented but perfect English. "Yay, assume. I wondered when you would find me." "My name is Daniel Hartman. I'm investigating—" "I know what you're investigating," she interrupted. "I've been waiting 18 years for someone to come asking questions about Die Glock. I'm almost relieved it's finally happening. The weight of keeping this secret alone has been considerable. She stepped aside, gesturing for us to enter. The interior of the house was spare, almost monastic, with few decorations except for a single photograph on the mantel. I recognized the man in the picture from the files, Dr. Victor Brandt, younger than I had imagined. With intense eyes and a slight smile that might have been confidence or madness, Amelia sat down heavily in a chair by the window, staring out at the snow-covered mountains in the distance. I did, and I hated him, and I feared him. Victor was all of those things and more. He was a genius who believed he could unlock the secrets of the universe, and in a way, he succeeded. She turned to face me, but the universe has secrets that are not meant to be known. Victor learned that too late. What happened on the night of January 28th, 1945? I asked. Amelia sat down heavily in her chair by the window, staring out at the snow-covered mountains in the distance. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. We achieved what Victor had always dreamed of. We broke through the barrier that separates our reality from whatever lies beyond, and we discovered that we are not alone in the cosmos. She paused. That there are intelligences out there, watching, waiting, existing in dimensions that human minds cannot fully comprehend. What kind of intelligences? Amelia turned to face me. Her eyes held depths of knowledge that no human should possess. I don't have words for what we saw. Human language wasn't designed to describe them, but imagine beings that exist outside of time as we understand it. Beings that perceive all of history, past, present, future, as a single moment. She stood up, walking to the window. Beings that have been aware of humanity since before we climbed down from the trees. Watching our development was something between curiosity and hunger. They feed on consciousness, on awareness, on the spark that makes sentient beings different from rocks and stars. Every time Die Glock was activated, it sent a signal into their dimension, like a beacon, like a dinner bell. Her voice dropped even lower. And on that final night, when Victor pushed the experiment further than ever before, we didn't just send a signal, we opened a door. Amelia turned to face me, and I saw tears streaming down her cheeks. 63 people were working in the facility that night. Scientists, technicians, soldiers, prisoners. When Die Glock reached full power, when the vortex expanded to fill the entire complex, they all vanished. She wiped her eyes, not died, vanished, pulled through the door into whatever dimension the bell had connected us to. But you survived. If you can call this survival, she laughed bitterly. I was in an observation booth when it happened, protected by several meters of lead shielding. The field touched me, but it didn't take me completely. She held up her hands, studying them as if they belonged to someone else. Instead, it changed me. My body no longer ages normally. I experience time differently than other people. Sometimes I remember events that haven't happened yet. Sometimes I forget things that happened yesterday. Her voice cracked. I exist partially in our dimension and partially in theirs, and I will continue to exist this way until whatever is left of my consciousness finally dissolves. What about Brandt? I asked. What happened to him? Amelia was silent for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was hollow. Victor was standing at the base of Die Glock when the breakthrough occurred. He was the first one taken. But before he disappeared completely, I saw something that I've never been able to forget. She met my eyes. He was smiling, not a smile of fear or madness, a smile of triumph. He knew exactly what was happening. He had planned for it. The entire project from the very beginning was designed to reach this moment. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Victor didn't want to control time or create weapons for the Reich, Amelia continued. He wanted to make contact with whatever exists beyond our reality, and he succeeded. Because Victor believed that these beings could grant immortality, that by merging with their dimension, consciousness could exist forever, free from the limitations of physical form. She walked back to her chair, sitting down slowly. He saw Die Glock not as a weapon, but as a gateway to eternal life. And the 63 people who disappeared with him, sacrifices, offerings, the price of admission to a realm that humans were never meant to enter. I sat in silence for a long moment, processing what I had just heard. The implications were staggering. If Amelia was telling the truth, and every instinct I had developed over 12 years of intelligence work told me she was, then the Nazi scientists hadn't just been pursuing a military advantage. They had been engaged in something far more fundamental, something that challenged the very foundations of materialist science. "Tell me about Richter," I said finally, the S officer who oversaw the project. "What happened to him?" Not in the Nazi ideology. He was too intelligent for that, but in the project itself, in what Victor was trying to achieve. She paused. While most of the SA saw Die Glock as a potential weapon, Richter understood its true purpose. He wanted to be there when the door opened. He wanted to be among the first to pass through. Did he get his wish, in a manner of speaking? On the night of the final experiment, Richter was in the main chamber with Victor and the others. He had insisted on witnessing the breakthrough personally. When Die Glock reached full power, when the vortex expanded to fill the entire space, he was standing less than 5 meters from the bell itself. So he was taken with the others. Amelia shook her head slowly, but last year, something happened that made me question everything I thought I knew about that night. She rose from her chair and walked to a wooden chest in the corner of the room. From inside, she withdrew a yellowed newspaper clipping, its edges crumbling with age. "This is from a Brazilian newspaper," she said, handing it to me. "Published in 1961. The article describes a strange incident in a small town in the Amazon basin." I read the article carefully. It described how a man had appeared out of nowhere in the middle of the town square, wearing a German military uniform. Speaking a language that no one could understand, he was taken to a local hospital where he died 3 days later, without ever regaining coherent speech. I looked at the grainy photograph accompanying the article. The man in the picture was elderly, his face gaunt and weathered, but there was something about his eyes, a quality that I had seen before in photographs from the Die Glock files. "You think this was Richter?" The uniform he was wearing was CES. The insignia matched Richter's rank, and according to the hospital records that I was able to obtain through unconventional channels, the man had physical anomalies that couldn't be explained by normal medicine. She sat down again. His internal organs were arranged incorrectly. His bones showed evidence of having been broken and healed hundreds of times, and his brain, the doctors who examined it after his death said they had never seen anything like it. The neural pathways had been completely restructured, as if his mind had been taken apart and reassembled according to a different pattern. I felt a chill run down my spine. How is that possible? If he was taken in 1945, how could he appear in Brazil in 1961? Amelia looked at me with those ancient knowing eyes. "That's the question, isn't it? My theory is that Richter didn't travel through space. He traveled through time. 16 years passed for us. But for him, who knows how long it was?" She leaned forward. "The beings that exist in that other dimension don't experience time the way we do. A day for them might be centuries for us, or vice versa. Are you saying that the others who were taken might still be alive, that they might return?" "I'm saying that the concepts of alive and dead may not apply in the way we normally understand them. Victor believed that consciousness is not dependent on physical form, that it can be transferred, transformed, preserved in ways that our science cannot yet comprehend." She paused, staring out the window at the mountains in the distance. If he was right, then the 63 people who vanished that night didn't cease to exist. They became something else, something that exists outside our normal framework of reality. She turned back to me. "And if they can return, if Richard could return after 16 years, then Victor might return as well, might already be trying to return. Every night when I close my eyes, I wonder if tonight will be the night I see him again, standing in my doorway, smiling that smile, telling me that he's finally ready to show me what lies on the other side." The weight of her words hung in the air between us. I had come to Poland looking for answers, for explanations that would make sense of the classified documents and the mysterious photographs. But what I had found was something far more terrifying. Evidence that the boundaries of reality itself were far more fragile than anyone imagined, that there were things waiting beyond those boundaries, things that had been waiting for a very long time. And that door, the door that Victor Brandt had opened on that winter night in 1945, had never been fully closed. What Amelia told me next confirmed my worst fears about the scope of this conspiracy. "The experiment didn't end in 1945, she said. After the war, both the Americans and the Soviets recovered fragments of the project, scientists, documents, samples of Xerum 5T25. They continued the research in secret, each side racing to recreate what Victor had achieved. How do you know this? Because they came to me, both sides, the Soviet first in 1946. They wanted me to help them rebuild Die Glock. I refused. So they imprisoned me for 3 years before I managed to escape to the West. She paused. Then the Americans found me, CIA officers, just like you. They offered me money, protection, a new identity, if I would share what I knew about the project. Did you help them? Amelia's expression was hard to read. I told them enough to convince them I was cooperating, but I held back the most important information: the frequencies, the precise configuration of the field generators, the composition of Zerum 5025. She stood and walked to the window. Without those details, they could build copies of Die Glock, but they couldn't make them work properly. They couldn't open the door, but they kept trying, for years. How many facilities? I know of at least 3 where experiments continued. One in Nevada, one in Siberia, one in Argentina, where former Nazi scientists were given sanctuary. She turned back to face me. Each time they activated their devices, they got partial results, strange phenomena, temporal anomalies, occasionally disappearances that were explained away as accidents or defections. She reached into the wooden chest again. This time she withdrew a folder containing photographs and documents. I've collected evidence over the years. Newspaper clippings about strange events near known research facilities, death certificates for scientists who worked on related projects, satellite photographs showing unusual construction in remote areas. Painted a disturbing picture of worldwide research into phenomena that official science insisted were impossible. References to projects with code names like Looking Glass, Kronos 2, Gateway, mentions of accidents that killed dozens of researchers, reports of test subjects who experienced impossible events, seeing future newspapers, remembering conversations that hadn't happened yet, aging decades in a matter of hours. The Americans called their main project Montauk, Amelia continued, after the location on Long Island where they conducted their most advanced experiments. I've heard rumors about what happened there, stories about portals opening in the middle of the night, about creatures emerging from those portals, about an incident in 1983 that was so catastrophic it forced them to shut down the entire program. What kind of incident? I don't know the details. The information is compartmentalized even within the intelligence community, but I've heard that they succeeded in opening a stable connection. Not just for seconds, but for hours. Her voice dropped to a whisper, and something came through, something that killed everyone in the facility before the connection could be severed. I felt my blood run cold. Morrison had mentioned American involvement in the post-war research, but I hadn't realized the scope of it. How many facilities? How many experiments? How many deaths? Did any of them succeed? I asked. Did anyone manage to replicate what Brandt achieved? There were rumors. In the late 1950s, I heard stories about a breakthrough at the Soviet facility, a successful activation that opened a stable connection for several minutes. She sat down again, her hands trembling slightly. The scientists who witnessed it were never the same afterward. Some went mad. Others became obsessed with recreating the experience, claiming they had glimpsed something beautiful beyond description. A few simply stopped speaking entirely, their minds apparently overwhelmed by what they had perceived. And Die Glock itself, the original device? The Soviets had it for years, but after the 1958 incident, they became frightened. They sealed the device in a facility somewhere in Siberia and classified all information about it at the highest levels. She met my eyes. As far as I know, it's still there, waiting. Waiting for what? For someone to be foolish enough to activate it again, or for something on the other side to find a way to activate it themselves. The implications of what she was telling me were staggering. Not only had the Nazi experiment continued after the war, but it had spread across the globe. Multiple governments, multiple facilities, all pursuing the same forbidden knowledge, all trying to open the same door that Victor Brandt had opened in 1945. "Why are you telling me all this?" I asked. "You've kept these secrets for 18 years. Why reveal them now?" Amelia was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was tired, almost resigned. "Because I'm running out of time. Not in the way normal people run out of time. But the changes that began when the field touched me in 1945, they're accelerating. I can feel myself slipping further away from this reality with each passing year." In the lamplight, I could see what she meant. Her skin had an almost translucent quality, as if she was slowly fading. "Soon, I won't be here at all. Not dead exactly, just elsewhere. And when that happens, these secrets will be lost. Unless someone knows." unless someone understands what really happened and what's still happening. Then when 8's deep at 18 for 18%, when that happens, that she had kept hidden for 18 years. A metal box containing documents she had stolen from the facility before the final experiment, technical specifications, research notes, diagrams of Die Glocke's internal structure, and something else. A final letter written by Dr. Victor Brandt on the night of January 28, 1945. "Read this," she said, handing me the yellowed pages. "Read it and understand what Victor believed he was doing, what he thought he would become. I've read that letter hundreds of times over the past 60 years. I've memorized every word, and I still don't fully understand what it means." The letter began simply. "Always so were in Bestig in the pumping. My dearest Amelia, if you are reading this, then the experiment has succeeded, and I have passed through the gateway that I have spent my life trying to open. Do not mourn for me. What I have achieved is beyond anything our limited human understanding can comprehend. I have seen them, Amelia, the beings that exist beyond the veil of our reality. They are not gods, though primitive humans might have perceived them as such. They are not demons, though they are certainly capable of inspiring terror, moments of creation, and learn to transcend the limitations that bind lesser forms of consciousness." The letter continued, describing visions that Victor claimed to have experienced during his prolonged exposure to Die Glocke's field. "They have shown me things. The true nature of time, which is not a river flowing in one direction, but an ocean in which all moments exist simultaneously. The true nature of space, which is not empty void, but living tissue, the body of something so vast that galaxies are mere cells in its structure. And the true nature of consciousness, which does not end with death but transforms, becoming part of something greater, something eternal." His words became more fevered toward the end. "I know you will think I have gone mad. Perhaps I have, by the standards of human sanity, but madness and enlightenment are often indistinguishable to those who have not experienced either. The experiment tonight will complete my transformation. I will no longer exist as Victor Brandt, a German scientist bound by flesh and time. I will become something new, something that will persist long after the Nazi Reich has crumbled to dust. Long after human civilization has risen and fallen 1,000 times, long after the sun has grown cold and the earth has become a frozen tomb." His final words were both a warning and an invitation. "Do not try to follow me, Amelia. The path I have chosen is not for everyone, but know that I will be watching, always watching. From a place where time has no meaning and distance is merely an illusion. When your species has evolved beyond its current limitations, I will be waiting to welcome you to the realm that has become my home." The letter was signed simply, "With eternal love, Victor." I folded the pages carefully and placed them back in the metal box. My hands were shaking. "He believed he was achieving transcendence," I said, "that he was evolving into something higher." "Yes," Amelia replied. "And perhaps he was right. Or perhaps he was consumed by something vast and hungry that he mistook for divinity. I've had 18 years to think about it. I still don't know which answer terrifies me more. Are you per se?" And I returned to Washington with Amelia's documents and Victor's letter. I wrote a report detailing everything I had discovered. The facility in Poland, the journal entries, Amelia's testimony, the evidence of post-war continuation. And then I watched as that report was classified and buried so deep that even I was forbidden from accessing it again. But I kept copies, hidden away, waiting for the right moment to reveal what I knew. That moment has finally arrived. I'm 87 years old now. I have terminal cancer. In a few months, I'll be dead. And the secrets I've carried for 60 years will die with me, unless I share them now. The truth is this: Die Glocke was real. The Nazi experiments into time manipulation and dimensional breaching were real. The beings that exist beyond our reality are real. And the governments of the world have known about all of this for decades, continuing research in secret while publicly denying that such things are possible. I don't know where Die Glocke is now. The Soviet Union collapsed, and who knows what happened to the facilities where they kept their most dangerous secrets. The American research programs were supposedly shut down in the 1970s, after too many accidents made continuation impossible. But I've heard rumors, stories about private companies and billionaire investors funding new experiments. reports of strange phenomena near certain research facilities, disappearances that are never properly explained. Someone, somewhere, is still trying to open the door that Victor Brandt opened in 1944, and eventually, they will succeed. When they do, the beings on the other side will be waiting, the beings that feed on consciousness, that perceive time as a single eternal moment, that have been watching humanity's development with patient hunger since before we learned to make fire. Victor Brandt believed he had achieved transcendence. He believed he had evolved beyond human limitation into something greater. But I've studied his letter for 60 years, and I've come to a different conclusion. Victor didn't transcend anything. He was consumed, made part of something vast and alien and utterly indifferent to human values or human suffering. His consciousness didn't achieve immortality. It became food for entities that exist beyond our comprehension, and the same fate awaits anyone foolish enough to follow him. I'm sharing this story now because I believe people deserve to know the truth. Not the sanitized version that governments allow to leak out as conspiracy theories. Not the sensationalized version that entertainment media presents as fiction. The real truth, documented in journals and letters and classified files that I risked everything to preserve. Die Glock was not just a Nazi experiment. It was an attempt to contact intelligences from beyond our dimension. It succeeded. And the door that was opened in 1945 has never been fully closed. If you're listening to this, be aware. Be vigilant. Question the explanations you're given for phenomena that don't make sense. Pay attention to the stories that get buried, the witnesses who disappear, the research programs that are suddenly and inexplicably shut down. The truth is out there, as they say. But the truth is far more terrifying than most people can imagine. And somewhere, in a dimension that exists parallel to our own, something ancient and hungry is still watching, waiting. For the next time someone is foolish enough to ring the bell, among the documents Amelia gave me was one last entry from her journal, written years after the war, dated simply 1963. It was tucked into the back cover of the journal, as if she had added it recently, perhaps knowing that someone would eventually come looking for answers. To whoever finds this, it began. I have kept silent for almost 20 years, but silence has its own weight, its own price. The things I witnessed in that facility have never left me. They live in my dreams, in the corners of my vision, in the moments between heartbeats when time seems to stretch into something larger than itself. Used to believe that Victor was wrong, that what he called transcendence was really just destruction, the dissolution of consciousness into something vast and hungry and indifferent. But lately, I'm not so sure. Her words became more unsettling as the entry continued. Sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, I see things, glimpses of other times, other places, other versions of reality. I see Victor standing in fields of light that have no source, smiling at me with eyes that hold the knowledge of centuries. I see the beings that took him, and they don't seem monstrous anymore. They seem patient, understanding, like parents watching a child struggle with a concept that will eventually become clear. I'm beginning to wonder if Victor was right all along, if what we called consumption was really just transformation, if the door he opened leads not to oblivion, but to a form of existence so different from our own that we lack the conceptual framework to understand it. Her final words chilled me to the bone. I'm tired of hiding, tired of being afraid, tired of existing in this strange half-state between dimensions, aging slowly while the world changes around me. Perhaps it's time to stop running. Perhaps it's time to find out what really lies on the other side of that door. Reads, this, and I'm no longer here. Don't look for me. Don't try to follow. Just remember what I've told you, and make your own choice about what it means. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed, but maybe that's not always a bad thing. The entry was signed simply, E.W. When I returned to Poland in 1965 to check on Amelia, the house at the edge of the village was empty. The villagers said she had walked into the mountains one night and never returned. Search parties found no trace of her, but one of the searchers told me something that has haunted me ever since. He said that on the night Amelia disappeared, the sky above the Owl Mountains was filled with strange lights, colors that didn't have names, patterns that seemed to form symbols just for a moment before dissolving into ordinary starlight. And in the distance, barely audible over the wind, he heard what sounded like a bell ringing, a bell that rang once, twice, 3 times, and then silence. I've spent the last 58 years thinking about what that means. Whether Amelia found what she was looking for, whether Victor was waiting for her on the other side, whether the beings that took them both were merciful or merely patient. I don't have answers to those questions. I don't think anyone does, but I know this. The door is still there, somewhere in the frozen wastes of Siberia, or hidden in a private facility funded by people who think they can control forces beyond human comprehension. Die Glock still exists, and sooner or later someone will activate it again. When they do, we'll find out whether Victor Brandt achieved transcendence or became something else entirely. Whether the beings beyond our reality are gods or predators. Whether consciousness survives death or simply feeds something vast and hungry in the darkness between dimensions, or you won't be here to see it. My time is running out. The cancer is spreading. Soon I'll find out for myself what lies on the other side. But you, whoever you are listening to this, you'll still be here. You'll be here when the next door opens. When the next researcher thinks they've found a way to breach the barriers of reality. When that happens, remember what I've told you. Remember Amelia Weiss and Victor Brandt. Remember the 63 people who vanished on that winter night in 1945. Remember that some knowledge comes with a price, and that price might be everything we think we are. This is Daniel Hartman, former CIA operative, keeper of secrets, witness to the impossible. This is my testimony, my warning, my confession. May God have mercy on us all. Because whatever exists beyond that door, I don't think mercy is something it understands. The bell tolls, and somewhere, something is listening.